How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and as always, I am joined by my wonderful sidekick. I don't know what the hell to call you. Christian Slater. Christian, how you doing this week?
Oh man, I'm just glad to be here this week. When I got to Hamilton with my American Coca-Cola, the Mounties were already waiting for me at the rendezvous point. It was a carbonated sting operation. Thankfully, a well-placed beaver throw got him off my back. I had to horsejack someone and ride like Maple Lightning across Lake Ontario just to get back.
So you rode a horse across the lake. Cool. Good. Glad. Good. All right. So, I don't know where we go after that, but I guess where we'll go is video games, because that's what the show is about after all, right? And there were a lot of video games to get into this week. I'm actually very thankful that it was kind of light on the news, because there was so much to play and to talk about and to dig into. So I guess we'll get started with kind of the biggest, to me at least, the biggest release of the week, because I think that this week in particular is probably the biggest 1-2 punch week all year. I think I would say Sony's biggest game of the year and Nintendo's second biggest game of the year, because they did do a Zelda earlier this year. So, that's kind of a big deal. So we saw the release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 as well as Super Mario Wonder. We'll dig into Spider-Man 2 first. So I don't know where to begin with this. So the first game, which came out in 2018, I believe, I knew I was going to enjoy it. From seeing previews and video footage and, interviews and all that stuff. I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy it, because at the time, and still kind of to this day, like I'm not really into the whole superhero thing for the most part. I've kind of opened up to it more as the years have gone by. I didn't really get into all the Marvel stuff. I remember I watched the 3 Iron Man movies at the theater, and that was pretty much about it. But I would rent them occasionally, and some of them I thought were, somewhat decent, and then some of them I thought were just absolute garbage. But this year, actually, I went through and I watched all the Marvel movies, at least the Infinity stuff. I haven't seen like the Eternals or anything like that. I did watch, I guess the most modern thing that I have, or the most recent thing I've watched was I did watch the new Guardians. I saw the most recent Ant-Man, and I saw WandaVision. But I went through and I watched all the Marvel movies, and I have an appreciation for them, to a degree. I still think that some of them are pretty rough, and just not for me. But, I enjoyed the larger overall story, and some of those characters I thought were really well done. But the Spider-Man movies, which for a while were completely separate, but the Spider-Man movies, I always would go and see those, and I'd go and see Batman movies, but I don't really view the modern Batman movies as superhero movies. They just happen to have superhero characters. Those Batman movies are pretty dark, between the Nolan ones as well as the newest one with, is Matt Jones the name of the guy that directed it? I can't remember. The one with Robert Pattinson. And I like him as Batman. I thought that movie was quite good. But the Spider-Man movies, they were always very light, for the most part. They tried to, put in some emotion, obviously, and things like that, especially with some of the subject matter that Spider-Man deals with, having a difficult loss in the death of his uncle, which is always a driving force for that character, and pretty much every iteration that we have seen on screen. But I always really enjoyed the Spider-Man movies, and I really like Tom Holland as the current Spider-Man. There's just something about Spider-Man that always just kind of kept me interested, even though I had kind of stopped. I read comic books as a kid, picked it back up a little bit in my early 20s, but kind of got out of it again. But Spider-Man was something I always kind of kept, not current, but if there was a Spider-Man thing coming out, I would, I'd be interested in it. So this game definitely had some draw and appeal because of that. And I remember I picked up the game and started playing it, and that opening sequence where you're going through the tower and you get to Kingpin and all that, I just thought it was so well done, and I just really enjoyed it. And I wasn't a huge Insomniac fan, because I had missed out on a lot of the stuff that they had done, especially with like the PS2 era. I didn't really play a lot of the big heavy hitter PS2 games. I think they did Infamous, and I played Second Son, I think. So I wasn't like super into the studio, so I wasn't really sure what they are capable of pulling off. And next thing you know, I'm just addicted to this game. It was the first game I had ever played where I wanted to complete everything in it. I wanted to do every objective, every side quest, all of that stuff. Even with other open world games, because it is one of my favorite kind of shells of a genre, so to speak. With like Grand Theft Auto is, that's like one of my favorite franchises, if not my favorite franchise of all time. And, even with those games, I don't typically do everything you can possibly do in them. But Spider-Man, there was just something about it where it was just like, I want to get every pigeon. I want to do every combat base mission type thing. I just want to do everything that this game has to offer. And in the 5 years since it has come out, I've played through it again multiple times, which is very rare that I do something like that. There's only a true handful of games that I have gone back and played through again to completion, that are like story narrative based games, like, back, arcade games. I've run through Final Fight a million times and Turtles in Time and all that stuff. And, I've played through like Mario 3 multiple times and all that. But in terms of like modern, like 20, 30 hour long games, it's pretty rare that I go through them again. But there was just something about Spider-Man, and I kind of quickly realized, like, despite this being a very recent game, like, I think this is one of my favorite games of all time. And I think it's like, if I was asked to do like a top 10 of my all time favorite games, like it's on that list, and it's probably pretty high up on that list. So when Miles Morales came out, I can't remember exactly when Miles Morales came out. I can't remember if I think I think it came out previous to me getting a PlayStation 5. And I remember I put off playing it on PS4 because I was like, well, I'm going to try and find a way to get a PS5. Because remember when the PS5 was coming out, it was fairly hard to get. But I eventually did get one, and the first thing I played on, aside from Astrobot, the built-in game, was Miles Morales, and I absolutely love that as well. That it streamlined a lot of stuff that people maybe had some complaints about in the first game. I know a lot of people took issue with the Mary Jane stealth stuff. I personally didn't mind it all that much. Was it great? No, but there were other things I didn't like more in that game. I wasn't super into a lot of the science missions and those mini games and all that stuff. So that was the MJ stealth stuff was kind of like not really a concern to me. But the Miles Morales game kind of stripped all that stuff out, and I really enjoyed it. So safe to say that Spider-Man 2, we kind of all knew that, hey, they're going to do a sequel. The game performed really well financially for them and critically and all that. So I was very much looking forward to it. And then when they announced Spider-Man 2, however long ago it was, a couple years ago at this point, I'm sure, and they showed Venom. I like Venom. Venom was a big part of my childhood. He was very popular in the comic books when I was a kid. And he made a lot of appearances throughout like the cartoon. I was a big Spider-Man animated series fan. And so when I saw that they were doing Venom, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But the thing that really really got me excited about this game was you could hear the voiceover in the trailer for the first look at Spider-Man 2, and you can hear the Russian accent. And I was like, oh man, they are doing Kraven. Now, Kraven is not, I guess I wouldn't consider him a top tier Spider-Man villain in the same way that you would like a Green Goblin, Lizard even, and Sandman, to the fact that I always thought Sandman was kind of like a B level villain, but he had appearances in film and he kind of got that resurgence. And I think Kraven's going to have that as well, thanks to this game. But Kraven was really, Kraven's Last Hunt was like a super big comic book run, and then they kind of did that on the animated series. But there's something always that really clicked with me with Kraven. I thought he was really interesting as a character, and I think that's maybe because like I had read The Most Dangerous Game when I was a kid, and I always thought that was a really interesting concept. And I was like, oh man, like Kraven as a character is just somebody that like you just need somebody to go in there and do that character justice, and maybe take a bit of a different take on him. and you could have something really, really special. And then when I saw that Sony kind of as a whole was going all in on Kraven, because there's the Kraven standalone movie that's coming out, which, by the way, as much of a Kraven fan as I am, that trailer looked like dog shit. I do not want anything to do with that movie. I have no faith whatsoever that that movie is going to do anything good to the character of Kraven. I hope that that doesn't sour Sony on Kraven too much, and maybe the response that the character is getting in the game shows that, like, hey, maybe we just made a misstep with, number one, the casting, and number two, just the overall look and feel of this movie. Because I think Kraven could be a really viable contender for a great villain in the MCU, especially when you take his role in this game, which is to hunt other villains, because he views them as like the biggest prey he could possibly get. Like, you can introduce Kraven to the MCU and he is hunting the other superheroes, you know, because they still, even though that main first run of Avengers or MCU movies is done with the Avengers, and we have a kind of a different set of characters these days, you know, maybe breathe some life into them, you know, a little bit, because, you know, Marvel movies are kind of down at the box office, kind of down in public opinion. So I was very excited that we were going to get Venom. I was very excited we were going to get Kraven. So it quickly kind of established itself as my most anticipated game. So I was, you know, very much counting down the days for the game to come out. And I fully intended on, you know, taking this past Friday and just be like, I'm going to play Spider-Man as much as I can that day. But I was very fortunate enough. I was able to get the game on Wednesday. So I got the game a couple days early. So I'm pretty deep into the game at this point. It doesn't tell you how long you've played the game in your save files for whatever reason. But there is the system tells you how long you've been in a game, but I've always found that to be like highly inaccurate on the PlayStation. About 14 hours into the game at this point, because, you know, I did have to stop to do regular life, but I'm definitely a ways into it, and it so far it has delivered in every way possible. I think it feels like a bigger story. It feels like there's maybe a little bit more at stake with the story. I think that they have done a pretty good job of weaving those two characters into one singular story with Miles Morales and Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, because now you have both together in one story. I think they do some really smart things to help you with switching between them. You know, you can just open up a menu, hold down the square button, and switch to the other Spider-Man. But also, if you are playing as Miles and you approach a mission marker where you have to play as Peter, it will either ask you if you want to switch to Peter, or sometimes it will just automatically switch and the cutscene will begin. And I think that's a really smart thing to do, because there are some side activities that are exclusive to either character. So if you're doing a bunch of the Prowler stuff for Miles, you don't have to worry about like, oh, I want to hit 2-3 Prowler puzzles and then go do this main story mission. I don't have to think about like, oh, I need to change to Peter at some point. The game will just either do it for me or ask me if I want to do it. The changes that they have made to traversal, I think, are huge. The web wing thing, where you can catch wind tunnels and glide. You are essentially flying in this game at this point. You know, eventually it will run out, but the wind kind of tunnels and currents that flow throughout the city are pretty plentiful. They're not necessarily going to carry you from one side of the map to the other, but you know, you can get pretty far before you lose your momentum. There's a mechanic when you swing in the game, you can always press the X button, it'll fire a web out and kind of propel you forward. And I want to say, because I just played Miles Morales again a few weeks ago, I want to say it limited you to 2 of those kind of propelling forward thing. And in this game, I don't know if it's infinite, but it's definitely more than 2, which really helps you zip around the city. And there's some like traversal unlocks where you can approach a corner, and instead of continuing your swing and just kind of swinging around the corner, you could press the circle button and you will like juke like you're in Madden almost, and just like juke around the corner very, very fast. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like it, you know, you are definitely not limited in your ways to get around the city and to get around the city fast. You're pretty well equipped. I had talked about in my video that went up on Friday that I guess my one big complaint was that some of the combat encounters felt like they just took too long to get through. I will say that now that I've leveled up several times. I think I'm like level 31 or 32 in the game now. Once you start unlocking those combat mechanics and the gadgets and the web powers and all that stuff, you're pretty okay with combat. I would say that the combat taking maybe a little bit too long for my liking is essentially gone away the more that I have upgraded my characters. So I would say that complaint is pretty neutralized once you get going with the game. I don't want to get into story spoiler stuff. When I finish the game, we'll do a spoiler cast thing like I did, for Starfield and done for other games throughout the year. So we'll do that. I'm sure I'll be done with this game in a week or two. So we'll dive into story stuff there. But I think the story so far in the game is very solid. I am enjoying it. Peter has this big side story, kind of away from the main theme that I've been involved in that's pretty good. I don't know if Miles has an equivalent. It's possible I just haven't unlocked it yet or got to that point. Maybe the way that the game is structured is you kind of do Peter's first and then Miles populates. There is one thing that I am concerned about, where there was a story mission that I did that was a Miles thing, and I was getting in the game, if you remember from both Miles Morales and in the first game, you kind of have like a cell phone essentially that you get calls on. And these calls are sometimes just kind of lore, talking about what's going on in the game, progressing the story forward a little bit while you're zipping around the city. And then sometimes they're calling and they're saying, hey, this thing is happening, you should go and do it. And then it triggers a story mission for you to go and do, or a side mission or whatever it may be. One of the big things with the story in the game, mechanic wise, is that you have an app and citizens of New York City can request Spider-Man's help on the app. So that kind of helps populate some of your side missions and kind of activity quests and stuff like that. And there was one where I was getting it from a character. I won't spoil who it is, but this character is talking to Miles and they're saying like, oh yeah, thanks for helping me with this thing. If you want to proceed forward, you should probably do this. But while I was doing that, something else took precedence over that call. I think I was getting too close to a mission marker and it triggered another phone call. And I'm kind of worried that maybe the game is bugged out and hasn't assigned me a mission that I'm supposed to have. So I am a little worried about that. I don't know if that's true or not. I have not looked at like a walkthrough or a guide for this game, because I'm worried that if I Google that mission, that it'll spoil some stuff, and I just don't want to be spoiled on it. If I really feel like it doesn't come up soon within the next couple of hours of playing, I'm probably going to have to do that and just deal with the potential spoiler if it's there, because I am a little worried that that's happened. There's been a couple bugs with this game, just graphical ones. I haven't run into anything else, but there's some graphical bugs where objects will stay on screen that aren't supposed to be on screen. And I have to quit out of the game and go back in for it to fix itself. That has happened a few times. But other than that, visually, I think the game looks amazing. I think Peter's face, people have been talking about the animation on Peter's face, and I talked about it in my video as well. His face just doesn't seem as emotive as every other character's, and he just feels very tight in the mouth. Like he's just very tight-lipped. Like his jaw doesn't move much. His lips don't really expand much. Even if he's smiling, he doesn't have like a wide, like a wide grin or anything like that, like everybody else does. And that's perfectly fine. There are people in this world that have mouths like that. Like that's a human thing. But I think for a video game, you want that kind of, I always equate acting in a video game to acting in the theater. People that act in the theater emote more, they enunciate more, they're louder, because they don't have, they're in front of a live audience, right? Those people need to hear them, and they need to be able to see their expressions. It's, I always put everything in pro wrestling terms. In pro wrestling, when somebody kicks out of a pin, they don't just kind of lightly kick out of the pin. They jerk their whole body to get out of that pin, because they need to make sure that the person in the nosebleed saw that they kicked out of that pin, right? So I think when everybody else has this very expressive and emotive face, Peter having this perfectly natural human being face that doesn't emote much, it stands out. I don't think it's weird overall, like a lot of people are saying, they're like, some people are saying like, oh, his face looks weird. It looks unnatural. It just looks, people have that kind of face. That's just the way it is. He just looks different than everybody else. You get used to it, but it does stick out. I will say it definitely sticks out. You will notice it. But I don't think it's this horrible thing or anything like that. Like some people are making it out to be like, oh, they really dropped the ball on the way that they designed Peter Parker, And I think some of that has to do with the fact that, when they remastered the game, they changed the facial actor, the likeness was swapped out. I enjoyed the first Peter more. He was a little bit older looking, but they wanted to go with a younger looking Peter, which I think is a little strange because it's not like he's in high school. He's definitely in his late 20s in this game. Certainly, I would say. So yeah, I don't know. I'm fine with it, but I can understand if people want to be nitpicky about it. I don't have many complaints. I really am enjoying just absolutely everything that this game has to offer so far. It's been a really fun experience, and I can't put it down. I needed to go to bed last night. I'm still playing this game, and it's just like that's just kind of the way it's been. It was like. This morning I had to, I record the show on Sundays, and on Sundays is kind of a big day for me to get errands done. And it's like, man, the first thing I do when I wake up this morning, I got to go to the grocery store and get groceries. But man, that controller's sitting there, and I guess maybe I could do groceries later. I could play Spider-Man, but I was good. I went to the grocery store. But, it's like tonight, it's like, man, once I get everything else done for that day, I'm going to be playing that until the controller dies and I got to recharge the controller. That has happened several times so far where it's like, oh shit, I guess I've been playing this game for a while. Because the vibration in the controller, this game really does some cool stuff with the DualSense controller. I would say, aside from Astrobot, which is that game, the entire game is essentially designed around showing off that controller. I think this is probably the best utilization of the DualSense since then. But because you are doing so much with it and it's pulling so much action, physical action on the controller with the triggers, it does feel like it is draining the battery life of the controller a little bit faster than normal. So I've had to recharge. So 14 hours into the game, I think I've had to recharge the controller 3 times now, maybe 4. So I mean, it's draining it pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, maybe I'll have some complaints as the story wraps up. I think it's a great version of Kraven, but I am so partial to Kraven that maybe they botched the landing and I have some complaints after that. We'll see when we get there. And we'll touch base about final thoughts when I get there. But so far, it's got me wondering. It's like, well, if this game keeps going the way it's going, and I like it more than the first one, the first one's one of my all-time favorite games. Well, shit, I guess welcome Spider-Man 2 to Steve's all-time personal top 10 video games, because it's just been really, really solid. I highly suggest, if you have the means to play it, if you have a PlayStation 5, I would definitely go and pick it up. The one thing I will say, if you did not play the first game, they have a very short recap that you can watch that explains the first game and Miles Morales. I would say that it's not enough, because there was DLC to the first game, and there are some big moments in this game that rely upon your knowledge of understanding that DLC. So I would say maybe find a written article online somewhere that explains the game. I believe Kotaku has one. Or better yet, there's probably a 5 to 6 minute video on YouTube you can watch that will sum up the first game, its DLC, and then Miles Morales. Because I think you do need to have a working knowledge. They very much expect you to remember how to play that first game. There is tutorialization in the game, but there are aspects of that game that are not tutorialized that they just kind of expect you to remember how to do. And one of the nice things is, even though it's maybe not tutorialized, and this isn't me trying to give them slack or make an excuse for them, but they do have a very extensive controls and move list in the options menu for you to check out, and it will explain how to do everything. So at least it has that. Would it be better if maybe they walk you through some stuff that they don't walk you through, but in lieu of having that, at least they do have some type of guide that shows you how to do it. But other than that, lots of suits to unlock, some cool suits, some stuff I haven't seen. There are some returning suits from the last game, and some brand new ones. You're unlocking suits kind of the same way where you're finding crafting materials around the city. You can cash those in to craft suits, or if you complete special missions, you'll be gifted suits. There's a couple of missions I've done for Miles so far where at the end, somebody will say like, "Hey, we have a thank you for you," and they give you a suit, which is kind of cool. But it's actually really funny. I hope this doesn't constitute as a spoiler, so I'm sorry, but Miles Morales is Puerto Rican, and he gets gifted a Spider-Man suit that is the Puerto Rican flag. How would they know Spider-Man is Puerto Rican? So it's like one of those things where it's like you kind of have to make a fuzzy logic jump on that one, and maybe that would have been a suit that you just unlock on your own instead of it being presented to you as a gift, because it's like, how would they know? So that's just one of those things. But there's a couple funny jokes in this game. Like, a lot of people start to know who these Spider-Men are. It's one of those things where like MJ kind of always knows, and like, Aunt May will figure it out, and Miles Morales' mom and all that stuff. But there's just like a bunch of people that are just like, oh, hey, is that Spider-Man? Like, it's just like, oh, okay. So it's just kind of funny in that regard. But, yeah, it's got my highest recommendation so far, but I will reserve judgment as a whole until I wrap up with it. Christian, we've been playing this game a lot lately, past few days. You got anything you want to add to all this?
I just knew I was gonna hate this. Every time I walk into a room now that this game's out, you're trying to suspend your fat ass from the ceiling going thwip, 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 thwip. This needs to end. Sony must die.
Yeah, I'm suspending myself from the ceiling because I want to fall on my neck and die, so I don't have to deal with you anymore. But yes, I would like to. Give me some web shooters. Let me shoot some webs. All right. Next up on the list is I finished the story mode of Mortal Kombat 1 finally. It took me a little while to get to it because I kind of put it off for a little bit to get through some other games. But this past week, I didn't really have much else to play until Spider-Man came out. So I figured, hey, let's get through that Mortal Kombat story. I enjoyed it. I think it kind of falls apart at the end. I think the ending of the game is very sudden. And I was not the only person that thought that. I went through and listened to a couple of podcasts that did like a spoiler cast to talk about it. And they kind of shared, everybody that I listened to kind of shared the same thoughts. Like, oh yeah, this big climactic battle, and then it just kind of doesn't even fade to black, just cuts to another scene, and it's like everything's done. It's like, oh, okay, all right. I thought the cliffhanger at the game was a little weak. Not super excited for that. I really want them to just start fresh. I want them to go back to what they did with, I think it was either 10 or 11. It must have been 10, I think, where it was like half the characters were existing characters and half the characters were brand new. I really want to get some new blood in here, some new characters. We don't really get that with this game. We get new-ish characters, like new to you, like pre-owned characters, because they bring in a lot of stuff from the PS2 GameCube era of Mortal Kombat. But I'd like to see some new original creations, because I think some of the original characters that they did a couple of games ago really did stand out. I thought Ferrator was pretty cool. Devora was pretty cool. Like, I'd like to see more of that instead of them just kind of resting on their laurels to a degree. Like, obviously they mix things up in this game with the timeline resetting, and it's like Sub-Zero and Scorpion are brothers now, and Liu Kang's a god, and stuff like that. But it was one of those things where the game overall, the story overall is very enjoyable. You get a good variety of characters to play as. You don't play as everybody on the roster because you are pretty much strictly playing as the good guys. But I think that just the landing, they don't really necessarily stick the landing. And I think that's been really indicative of video games this year as a whole, where I think, like, I look back at like every major story-driven, narrative-driven game that I've played this year, there were fatal flaws in all their stories. And I think Mortal Kombat kind of falls into that, unfortunately. Like, mechanically, the story is very cool, especially towards the end. You have to do this big, like, gauntlet battle thing, and that has got some awesome Easter eggs in it. And just some, if you're like a diehard Mortal Kombat fan, it's got some really cool payoffs for you, and it will definitely kind of pique your interest and make you go, oh man, that's all. Like, I was constantly just like geeking out in my seat while I was playing it, because I just thought they were doing some really neat stuff. But yeah, I want to see them kind of shift away from all this, but it seems like they're not going to, because there was a cliffhanger to everything else. I was really hoping that there wasn't going to be a cliffhanger, in this game, because I just want something different. But it sounds like we're going to get kind of more of the same, and it is what it is. But Mortal Kombat, I think it's obviously this was a big year for fighting games, because Street Fighter 6 came in and really blew everyone away. I think overall Street Fighter 6 is going to, like, from a competitive standpoint, it's probably going to have the greater legacy of the two. I think that Street Fighter 6 is probably a more interesting game to watch. Mortal Kombat is very juggle heavy, and sometimes it's just not that interesting to watch. People get stuck in these long looping combos that they can't get out of, whereas Street Fighter 6 at least feels a little bit more back and forth. Of course, you can get stuck in a long combo, but I feel like maybe you have a little bit more ability to get out of one or to prevent one from happening than you do in Mortal Kombat. There are a lot of times in Mortal Kombat where you just whiff a move and you are just wide open for a while until you recover. So you can be punished very, very easily in it. But that being said, with Street Fighter 6, I think competitive wise, having probably the greater legacy of the two, I think Mortal Kombat is probably the better game. I think it's a better looking game, a better sounding game, better playing game, which is probably is the most important part. That's debatable. I think everybody's kind of got their pros and cons with both, but I think the overall package you get with Mortal Kombat as a video game purchaser is better, because I think the single player portion of Mortal Kombat was better than the single player portion of Street Fighter 6. And granted, this is Street Fighter's first time really kind of doing a big single player thing. I think they've got a lot to learn from, a lot to build upon. I'm curious to see if they try to do the Mortal Kombat thing next time and do a big narrative cutscene heavy sort of deal, or stay with this create a character kind of fight generic people out in the world kind of thing. I think both have their merits, both work well, and both have drawbacks, certainly. But yeah, Mortal Kombat 1 definitely met my expectations, and I would say exceeded them as well, especially graphically. I think I genuinely think it's probably the best looking game that's come out this year. It's very impressive. It's some of the background effects and some of the bright colors and all that stuff are amazing. And the facial animation is just next level. I mean, it's very, very good. Spider-Man 2 looks amazing. Don't get me wrong. It's really pardon the pun, but I mean, it is very spectacular to look at. There are scenes where just so much is happening and it doesn't get muddled and you don't get lost in all the effects that are going on, whether it's electricity or there's fireworks or explosions or whatever it may be. Like, it is a very polished package. But I think Mortal Kombat 1, probably just because the scope is much smaller, I think visually is just really, it's like looking at candy. I mean, it's very pleasurable to the eyeballs. So yeah, I was happy to wrap up the story and happy to have played the game, and I'm looking forward to what they do next, but I'm cautious with what they're going to do, but we shall see.
That gauntlet fight at the end of the game is the best depiction of being on trial while you're still too drunk to understand the consequences of your actions that I've ever seen. Hats off to the developers for shining a light on a lesser seen part of the human condition.
Yeah, I don't think that was like an allegory for being in court. Cool. It's interesting to see what your brain pulls from words. You interpret the world differently than me. Okay. Next up on the list is, I don't have much to say about this because I didn't get a chance to play a ton of it. Let's talk about Mario Wonder. I actually did get a chance to play some Mario Wonder. I like it. It's a little challenging for me. I'm not great at video games. I've said that many times on here, and I've certainly demonstrated it if you've watched me play video games on this channel. So I am running into a few issues with making some progress, but I am really enjoying it. I don't think it really reinvents the wheel. I know people are really singing the praises of this game, and it's got a very positive appearance in the review scores and just kind of video game discourse that's been going on since it came out. I think it's very good. It's definitely the best 2D Mario I've played in quite some time. I am really enjoying it. But I don't know if it's really that like... I don't know. Some people are saying like it's like one of the best Marios of all time. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But I am enjoying it quite a bit. I am personally just kind of counting down the days until they do their next 3D Mario like Odyssey, because Odyssey was very special. And to me, that's one of the greatest Mario games of all time. So I'm just kind of waiting for that. But Mario Wonder is very fun. It's very bright, colorful. There's a lot going on to it. A lot of interesting choices graphically. A lot of like drug trip influence, a lot of LSD type stuff. You're chomping down on wonder seeds, and then you're in this like psychedelic world, and you're collecting purple coins and all this stuff, and the flowers are talking to you, man. And there's a little plant that kind of looks like Hitler, and I wish that was a joke, but I asked somebody else, they confirmed that they saw it too. That dude definitely looks a little bit too much like Hitler. So this game is very odd for a Mario game in that regard. But in terms of the way it plays like pretty much every other Mario game. The elephant suit they've been talking a lot about, you know, it's kind of the next big power up for Mario. It's fine. You know, you can run through stuff and jump on things and use your trunk to swat Goombas out of your way and stuff like that. But I get the feeling that the badge system, which right now I only have the one badge, I have the ability to kind of float in the air by having my hat turn big and kind of acting as a parachute. You know, we'll see where it goes with that. But I don't have too much to say because I'm only 7 levels in, or something like that. I played it for about an hour last night. But I enjoy it so far. I think it's a well polished package for Nintendo, and I think it's an excellent game for them to release this time of year. I think for a lot of Switch owners, this will be in their stocking or wrapped under the tree for them at Christmas time. I think this is going to do very well for Nintendo and be a pretty good holdover until next year when I'm pretty certain we're probably going to get their next console next year. I'm hoping that means we'll get the next big 3D Mario at launch, but who knows. But I think this is a nice cap to 2023 for Nintendo. They started off the year very strong back in the spring with the new Zelda, and to end the year in the fall with the new Mario, I think is a really good way for them to bookend the year. I think it's one of the strongest years Nintendo's had in a little bit, especially because Switch sales are starting to kind of go down. It's getting long in the tooth. It's been out there for a while, so I think that this is a nice break for Nintendo, and kind of they get to revel in the success of the Switch as it begins its kind of end of life cycle as they move into the next thing. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. If you have a Switch, I would get the new Mario. That's kind of what you do, right, Christian? You get the new Mario.
If I started stomping through society as a half human, half elephant mutant, I don't think things would quite play out the same for me.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, you stomp through society now not as a mutant, and things don't go out well for you. That's why you're stuck inside of a television living in my house. Speaking of drug trips, the next thing is a game that I never thought would be a thing. And I want to talk to the guy that made this game. I want to know where he was coming from in this, because this was amazing. This is Frasier Fantasy. It's the new Game Boy Color style RPG that is essentially an episode of Frasier that never existed. If you are interested in checking it out, and I definitely suggest that you do, especially if you're a fan of the show, I have a full playthrough of it up on the channel. Recorded that this past week. It's not very long. I can't remember how long the video is, somewhere around a half hour, maybe less. I really enjoyed it, but I'm a really big fan of the show. I'm currently in the process of watching every episode from start to finish. I've seen most of Frasier just out of order because I was watching reruns. So this is my first time kind of watching it in sequential order. And I am absolutely loving it. It's quickly become one of my all-time favorite sitcoms, and I'm a very big sitcom fan. The writing in this is very similar to an episode of Frasier. A lot of the same in-jokes, a lot of the same recurring themes and tropes that the show employed over the years. If you have an emotional connection or familiarity with the characters, you 100%, it's going to make you laugh even more because it's like, oh man, it's exactly the way they act. It's got some nice Easter eggs to the show, some callbacks to the show, stuff like that. Some of the boss fights are absolutely hilarious. Like aside from doing a physical attack where Frasier can slap people in the face, he could just practice therapy on them and talk about their life in terms of how it relates to a banana. He can also just drone on and on and on because it's kind of like a recurring theme where Frasier just talks and talks and talks and people don't give a shit about what he has to say. So that's kind of fun. You could put people to sleep that way. It's really, really enjoyable. And I'm glad that I was able to, every time I put a video out, I always post on social media that it's out, and I was glad that the developer saw that I had put the thing up, and I just wanted to say thanks to him for making this because it is really nice, bright spot, and just something I didn't anticipate. And I finished this, and I was like, is this 30-minute little thing going to be like one of the games of the year this year? Because it's just like, it's so good. It's just so well made. But yeah, I definitely check out the video if you haven't seen it. And if you want to play it, the entire game is playable in browser. You can download a version that you can play with a Game Boy emulator, or you can put it on an analog pocket. I just did the browser version. You just use keyboard to play. And yeah, it was a super enjoyable experience. To wrap up games for this week, let's talk about something that wasn't a super enjoyable experience, and that was Sonic Superstars. I had every intention of recording a video for Sonic Superstars because I was like, until Spider-Man comes out, they'll give me another video to put up. But then, the Frasier thing happened. I did that instead. So I was like, maybe I'll do Sonic next week. So I kind of put off playing it. And it's not good. It's just really not. I wrote down some thoughts. I'm not a big Sonic fan. I like the characters. I like the look of the games. I appreciate their position in the pantheon of video games. Sonic is a very important character. He's crossed over into comic books and television and now movies. So it's a character that has some staying power, some legs underneath it, but I never was super into the games. There was something about the games where, to me, on a surface level, it always seemed like the whole point of the game was to go fast, right? Like you want to get up to speed and you want to go really fast. But my biggest problem with that was you couldn't stay going fast. You would always run into a wall or run into an enemy and lose all your rings. And it's just like, I don't get it. And one of the things that really stands out for me with this game is the position of the character on the screen. So he's not centered in the screen. He's a little bit further than centered towards the right-hand side of the screen. You are going left or right in this game. You can backtrack, but he's always like not quite 3/4 of the way up the screen, but definitely above halfway. And because of that, you don't have a lot of time to react to what's coming to you. Now, I understand that that's a mechanic in a lot of endless runners on mobile devices, but those are games that are trying to get you to fail because they want you to use your real money to buy more lives. And that shouldn't exist in a game like this. I should be positioned farther back on the screen so I can anticipate what's coming because I don't want to lose that momentum. I don't want to get out of that flow. I want to be in a continual motion, dodging enemies, jumping on their heads to get more rings, entering these warp zone portal things that we'll get into. And that's just not the way this game is. There's so many times where I was up to full speed and then just in an instant, I run into a wall that I couldn't anticipate coming because I'm moving so fast. And I'm so close to the edge of the screen that it's just like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I guess that's done. Well, now I don't have enough speed to continue this track because I can't get around this loop. Well, I guess I'll just go backwards and go somewhere else. This is not fun. I just don't get it. I don't understand what sets this apart from any other 2D Sonic game. It's the same general art style. It's the same general music direction. Carbon copies the enemies, the little lobsters or crabs that go around. You're playing as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or some other characters as well. I think Amy's in there. And when you're not going full speed, the movement is definitely kind of rough. I felt like I was fighting with the controller quite a bit. I feel like I was fighting the controller a little bit in Mario as well, but definitely not this much. I feel like I had a little bit more control over my character in Mario Wonder than I do in Sonic. Maybe the characters do play different from each other. Maybe that's just I was playing as Knuckles. Maybe if I was playing as Sonic or Tails, I wouldn't have that issue. I don't know. But at least the way I was playing it, that's the way it felt. You come across these like warp points, you can jump into them and they transfer you to a different sort of game within a game. And they are just incomprehensible. There's no direction to tell you what to do other than go grab the ring or go grab the coin or something like that. They don't tell you how to do that. So you're just kind of fiddling around with it until you kind of figure out what you're supposed to do. And there's a timer counting down and it's just like, I guess I'll wait for this to run out of time so I don't have to do this anymore. But then you'll, unexplainably run into something that gives you more time. So now you're kind of stuck. And it's like, well, I guess I'll figure out how to fiddle my way through or fumble my way through the controls to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And it's just not fun. That's the biggest thing. The takeaway from this game is just it's not fun. And I don't understand what Sega is trying to do with this. I wrote this down because I don't want to forget my point from last night when I wrote all this. But at this point, I cannot imagine what Sonic is doing in terms of a video game perspective from Sega. I can't imagine this game and the other Sonic games are bringing in the big bucks. I have to imagine that Sonic makes more money at this point in licensing the character out than it does from the sales of the video games. Every time I go to Target, there's a big display of Sonic toys. Sonic has had 2 very successful movies at this point. There have been modern cartoons. I think there was one on Netflix not too long ago. I would wager to say that Sonic is more relevant outside of video games than he is in video games at this point. I think that they really need to sit down and think about what the future of Sonic is for them and either put the character to sleep for a really long time with video games and just focus on other forms of media, or they need to pool as many resources as they possibly can together and come up with something wildly different than what they're doing and go for like a Mario 64, Mario Odyssey, Mario Galaxy type thing. But I think at this point, when it comes to video games, I don't think they're willing to take chances with Sonic. Otherwise, they would have by now. They keep making these out-of-date, retro-inspired 2D Sonic games that look identical to the ones that have come before them. And I just don't understand what the point is from a business perspective, because it's not bringing in new fans. You have the hardcore Sonic fans that'll just buy whatever comes out. But I'm sure even some of them are just like, man, I'm kind of done doing this. Like, what's the point? There are better games out there. There are better 2D platformers out there. I don't know. I just don't really understand it. Maybe it's just one of those things where Sonic will just never be for me. Maybe it'll just be a series, a franchise that I just never really understand. But I'd like to, because I like how bright and colorful it is. I like the look of the characters. I think some parts of Sonic's story are really fun. But maybe it's just a thing that I'm just not a part of, because the games are just not for me. And maybe they never will be, but we'll see. But that's going to wrap up what I have been playing, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and thankfully kind of a light week for news, kind of a nice break from things. There's a lot of major stories have sort of settled a little bit, but definitely some interesting stuff to get into. The first one is kind of a big one. Pete Hinds is retiring from Bethesda after 24 years there. So Pete Hinds is probably the second most well-known person from Bethesda, aside from Todd Howard. Pete Hinds was kind of like their PR guy, essentially. I'm trying to see what his actual title is. The article does not say, but I think he was kind of like their PR guy. He was out in the media, especially a lot with Starfield. He was doing interviews on behalf of the company for Starfield, and also just talking shit to people on Twitter, which was pretty fun. So the quote from him, he posted on all of his social media. After 24 years, I've decided my time at Bethesda Softworks has come to an end. I am retiring and will begin an exciting new chapter of my life, exploring interests and passions, donating my time where I can, and taking more time to enjoy life. This was not a decision I came to easily or quickly, but after an amazing career culminating in the incredible launch of Starfield, it feels like the time is right. This is certainly not goodbye by any means. My love of Bethesda and its people has never wavered. I will never stop being part of this incredible community that we have grown. Thank you to the hundreds and thousands of fans I've gotten to meet and talk to over the last 24 years. Your energy, creativity, and support has been such a big part of my journey. I look forward to experiencing the next part of the adventure alongside with you. And then Bethesda, as a company, also put out a statement saying, Pete's public presence was only a small part of his role at Bethesda, although the way he represented us carried over into the values he nurtured here: authenticity, integrity, and passion. And then they end by saying, we're thankful for his 24 years of leadership and wish him best in this next chapter. I just want to get, because it is going to drive me nuts, I just want to know, okay, he was head of publishing. Okay, head of publishing. That makes more sense than just PR. He seemed like a PR guy because he was really out there doing a lot of promotion and talking to people on Twitter and stuff like that. But yeah, head of publishing. So pretty big role for him. And this, honestly, this isn't surprising. 24 years at the same place, that's a long time. It does sound like he is not necessarily immediately jumping to another role in video games. He is saying he's retiring. But what does that actually mean anymore? He could end up doing consulting work, or he gets bored in a year and decides he wants to get back into video games. Who knows? But it's not surprising really, because, with the sale of Bethesda, he and many other people that work there got big payouts, and, they just released their biggest game in a long time. It's probably a good time to say goodbye. And I'm sure he probably isn't the only person that's like, well, we just poured everything we have into this game. I don't know if I want to do another one, or I don't know if I have another one in me. I got my payout. I'm probably pretty good. I can move on and do something else. So I wouldn't be surprised if other people from Bethesda go off and do that. I don't think anybody probably on the level of his role in the company is going to do that. There are some people asking online like, hey, you think Pete or Todd Howard might leave? I don't think so. I think Todd's going to be there for a good long time until he is truly done with the industry. I don't think he is going to kind of cut his losses and leave, unless maybe something comes up. I don't know, family stuff could happen, personal life issues can come up, and he checks out, whatever. But, I would say for at least the next Elder Scrolls and the next Fallout, Todd Howard is probably around. But I mean, that's, that's another 10 plus years of living and working, so who knows? But, sad to see him go. We'll see how Bethesda kind of comes back from this. Obviously, being head of publishing now is going to be a little bit differently now that they've been acquired by Xbox. They still have their kind of subsidiaries at Bethesda, like Machine Games and id and all that stuff. But that's all part of the greater Microsoft umbrella now. So it's probably, that job probably lost a lot of its pain points, to not to say he had an easy job by any stretch, but, I'm sure a lot of the stressors of being a company that is publishing games with financial risk, a lot of that probably was alleviated when you get acquired by a Goliath that is Microsoft. So, it probably allowed him to maybe be a little bit more hands-on with projects and work with people. And it seems like that was what he really, enjoyed doing from what I can tell. So, it's kind of one of the bigger, retirements, or, that we've seen this year, along with Jim Ryan not too long ago from Sony. And, a lot of these guys that have been around, my entire life, your entire life, that have been involved in these big companies, they're not getting younger. And some of them are getting to the, kind of what most people would consider retirement age. Thankfully these guys are getting out a little bit earlier. They're not working themselves to death until their late 60s or 70s or something like that. But, they're able to retire at a good pace and kind of just go off and do what they want to do. As much as working on video games is a dream, some people have other interests and they want to pursue other things in life and, move on and, spend some time with your family and not be involved with crunch and not be involved with jerks on the internet trying to tear you down every which way. It's probably nice to get away from all that. So I definitely don't blame them. So hopefully whatever Pete does next, he finds success and enjoys a break, a much deserved break, Hey,
if Bethesda needs someone new to be an asshole online to their customers, I'm shaved and ready to rumble.
You would be excellent, man. I could definitely see you just taking a sweet job as a social media manager somewhere. You should definitely get right on that. All right, let's shift over to Epic Game Store. So Epic is kind of coming up with a new incentive plan to get people to bring their games over to Epic. So there's kind of two programs here. So there's the Epic First Run. This was announced a couple months ago. It lets developers claim 100% of revenue if they agree to make their game exclusive on Epic Game Store for 6 months. After the 6 months are up, they revert back to the 88% split. So they keep 88% and Epic gets 12%. And then there's going to be another program coming out that they want you to essentially get your back catalog on to Epic. So let me see. Let me find the right part of the statement here. So it's called Now on Epic. It's a back catalog incentive. They're calling it a scheme over at VGC. But the quote from Epic says, "This program is open to developers and publishers with registered Epic Games developer accounts and eligible products that launched on another storefront or another service before October 31st of 2023. So the time is ticking on this. Any product that has been previously released and is currently live on another third-party PC store or included in a third-party subscription service available on another third-party PC store is eligible. If you have 3 or more products on a third-party store or third-party subscription service, you have to bring at least 3 of them to the Epic Game Store. If you have less than 3, you have to bring all of them to the Epic Game Store. You can enroll until December 31st of next year, and all eligible products have to be made available on the Epic Game Store by June 30th, 2025. So you definitely have some time to do this. But Epic they're really trying to get as many people onto the Epic Store as possible. You know, when the Epic Store launched, I know myself and a lot of people were worried because it's like, I'm already so invested into Steam. And there were definitely some people that were really invested into GOG. And I think Galaxy is their thing, where they're like, I don't know if I want to split my library between these two things. Now, of course, in Steam, you can add non-Steam games and launch them from there. I did that with the EA Origin stuff for a long time. But I know that there was just kind of some reservation. But then Epic got some exclusives, and they were incentivizing people with having the lower split. Steam was taking more of a percentage from sales. So Epic lowered theirs to try and get people over. But we just saw Epic is selling off stuff, and they are laying off people. They just sold off Bandcamp, and they sold off that internal, whatever it was, marketing thing that they had. And then they just laid off 830 employees, which is 16% of its workforce. They also announced that they're increasing the price of Fortnite V-Bucks, and they're going to start charging for the use of the Unreal Engine outside of video game development next year. So they are really trying to bring some income in. It seems like they were really trying to coast on the wave of the success of Fortnite, maybe a little bit harder than they should have. The statement when we talked about the layoffs, it was whoever was in charge of Epic, I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, said like, we just kind of, we thought we were going to have more money than we do, and we spent more than we had coming in, and we keep doing that, and we can only do it for so long, and now we're kind of screwed, and everybody's losing their job. And we're going to make people pay more for V-Bucks, but I guess we'll take less of a hit for 6 months on games just to get people over here. I get that Epic wants to be all things to every people, but Steam has just got too much of a foothold. And there are problems with Steam, and there are things that people don't like about Steam, but Steam is very convenient, and it's been around for so long. It has name recognition, and it works just fine. I don't have any problems with it. I genuinely don't have any complaints. But I also don't interact with Steam the same way a lot of people do. I don't play PC games online with people, so I didn't really care about Steam community stuff and Discord integration and all that stuff. I don't use Discord. It's a very foreign thing to me. I see like, on Patreon, they'll always be like, oh, you can join our Discord. I'm like, I'm never going to do anything with that. So I think that this is just them trying to kind of restructure things a little bit and get people into their ecosystem. And I just don't have any interest with it. I have a total of maybe 3 or 4 games I purchased through the Epic Store. Hitman 3 was an Epic exclusive when it launched, so I have Hitman 3 on there. I think I have like Saints Row the Third on there, and There was some other game that was exclusive to the Epic Store that I bought a couple years ago. But for the most part, by and large, I'm just running Steam, and it's perfectly fine for me. There really only been those 2 or 3 instances since the Epic Store launch where it's like, well, I guess I have to get the game on Epic. It really doesn't come across or doesn't come up that much. So, I guess maybe if I was exclusive to playing on PC, I would run into it a little bit more. But for the most part, all the major games are coming out on all the different services that you can buy PC games on. So it doesn't really come up that much. But I think it's cool that they are offering this incentive to get more games onto the Epic platform. And also, hey, letting you keep 100% revenue for the first 6 months, that's pretty big, because probably for the most part, unless you're a live service game that catches on later on, your biggest amount of sales are going to come within that first 6 months, especially on launch day. So that's, a nice little package that's going to be appealing for developers. Next up, in some kind of bummer news here. So one of my games that I was really looking forward to, it's coming out, I think the day you see this, I think it's coming out tomorrow on Tuesday, City Skylines 2. But the more I hear about City Skylines 2, the more I wonder, number one, do I want to play City Skylines 2? And number two, am I going to be able to play City Skylines 2? So the first game I could never get running on my computer for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. I think whatever computer I had at the time maybe just wasn't up to snuff for it. And I'm sure with the computer I have these days, it would run perfectly fine. So I just kind of just put it off and was like, I'll wait for a sequel. And they finally announced a sequel. I was like, great, I'm going to get in from day one because I miss having a SimCity style city builder and I want to get into this. And then it just kind of problems along the way. They delayed the console version, which didn't really affect me that much because I'm going to play it on PC. But then they kind of started making some statements about the game is not in good shape, but they're still going to launch it. They're not going to delay it. So the article is titled, this is from VGC, City Skyline 2 will launch with performance issues. Paradox has warned its players. We still think for the long term of the project, releasing now is the best way forward. I'm assuming it's because Paradox said, you need to get this fucking game out because it's taking too long. So yeah, the game comes out on the 24th. They've delayed the console versions. I saw the recommended specs for this game. And I know that these days I no longer have a top of the line PC. I did a couple of years ago. I no longer do. I don't have a 40 series card. I have a 3080 in here, but I've been able to run everything that I want to pretty okay. I've run, I've run Cyberpunk, no issues. I've run Starfield, no issues. Red Dead Redemption 2, no issues. And those are games that are kind of taxing. They have a lot going on in them. And looking at the system recommendations for City Skylines 2, and it's like, well, I guess you can run this on a 3080. And it's like, geez, what am I supposed to do? I need to have a 4090 to run this thing. And even then, people are saying that it might still run like crap on that. It's like, what are you doing with this? They also said that they are getting rid of certain modding abilities where you have to use their in-game mod tools. And some people are saying that this is not great. Those that have experience with modding, the first game, apparently it was much easier to do it outside of their tools. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. It's a very weird thing to come out and say, like, hey, our new game's coming out. People are looking forward to it for a long time. It's going to run like garbage for a while. So I don't know. I mean, it's on Game Pass. So I'm going to check it out because I don't have to spend, any extra money on it. So I will check it out. I don't know if I'm going to record a video. If it's not running well, then there's really no point. But I am going to at least download it on Tuesday and give it a look and see what's up with it. But man, it's just so disappointing. I guess in a way, thanks for the transparency, but it's like such a weird thing to just come out and upfront say, like, yeah, this game's it's not looking good, but we're coming out next week, so you better give us money. I don't know. I don't know. I thought Paradox, hit a home run with the last Crusader Kings, and it seems like ever since then, it's just not been great. So who knows? Our final story this week, which is definitely the most important story of the week because it involves dogs, and we are a dog positive, a pro dog news informational program over here. So this week in puppy news, a dog is going to compete at GDQ. So Peanut Butter, the dog, he is adorable. He's a Shiba Inu. He is going to compete at GDQ, and he is going to be playing the game Gyromite on the NES. This originally was the game that you played with Rob the Robot, which was an actual robot that you would buy. It was yay big, and he would physically move and play the game along with you. It was like if you didn't have a sibling like me, you could have a fake sibling, and he would do things. He would play the game with you. But yeah, there's video out there of the owner of the dog. His name is JSR, who's a speedrunner in his own right, playing with the dog. He's essentially using, it's nothing groundbreaking. He's using treat incentivation to get the dog to press on this kind of custom made controller with his feet, but the dog is doing it, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, he's going to be competing at GDQ 2024. So I will definitely be on the lookout for that. GDQ and SGDQ are always very fun events. I get really into them. I love watching them. If you have never watched a speedrunning thing, you can certainly watch it live if you want. I tend to not watch it live because on the Games Done Quick YouTube channel, they just put everything up after the fact. And there's some really great write-ups. You can find them on Kotaku will do them, people on Reddit, stuff like that, where they'll just kind of watch everything that comes out and write up a thing saying like, here are the speedruns you need to watch, or here's a world record, or whatever it is. And you kind of just start crossing them off the list there, because some of the games are just games you're not interested in. Some of the games are just there for kind of novelty value and aren't really an amazing speed run or anything like that. And some of them are just kind of there for the jokes. But it's always a fun event. I think that they've fallen off a little bit. I think some of the reason why is just because so many of the games have been run to death, and you see just a lot of the same stuff every year, which is understandable. A lot of speed running is people trying to kind of compete in the same games to hit records and things like that, or make up crazy rules for different categories and stuff like that. But I think the past couple of GDQs, I haven't been as invested in. It's just because it's like, I've seen Super Metroid run a million times. I've seen this game run a million times. I'm good. But I will always be on the lookout for just weird categories, weird rule sets, and all that good stuff. So, Christian, any thoughts on this dog playing this game?
Look, I hate absolutely everything you do and everything about you, but your dog's pretty good.
Yeah, my dog is very good. Also in puppy news this week, my dog is good. He's a good boy. All right. So that's going to wrap up the show for this week. Coming up on the channel, I truly don't know. Let me look to see what's coming out this week. I don't know if there really is much coming out this week. Yeah, so City Skylines 2 is tomorrow. Alan Wake is out this week. The new EA UFC game is out this week. I'm not going to be picking up Alan Wake, so we're not going to have anything with that. Maybe we'll have some footage on either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week for EA UFC. But then, it really does slow down. Like, the next thing is the Like a Dragon Gaiden, the Manda Race's name is the 9th of November. Modern Warfare 3 is November 10th. Those are a couple weeks away. 2 weeks away from this Friday is Call of Duty. We'll definitely have plenty of Call of Duty stuff when the game comes out. We'll probably do a stream that night for multiplayer, and maybe stream it a couple of times or something like that for some multiplayer matches. But yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit slow, I guess, on the channel. Maybe what I'll do is take that time, since there's not a lot out for me to record, and maybe try and get another short or two up. It's been a while since I put a short up, at least a few weeks. So maybe we'll try and do that. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's gonna kind of start slowing down at the end of the year here, as we gear up for the last kind of handful of releases, and then it's kind of slim pickings until the middle of January when that Prince of Persia comes out. And then we'll kind of pick up the pace as we go. I don't think that that Prince of Persia game is like a smaller scale game. This year started off real hot in February with Hogwarts Legacy and then Star Wars Jedi Survivor right after that. I don't think as of right now there's any super big releases at the first couple of months of next year. Maybe that changes, or maybe there's something I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head. I know that next Like a Dragon game, the main Like a Dragon game, is early next year, but I can't remember if that's like February or March. But yeah, it might just be a little bit slower start to the year next year. And, I don't know what the big hyped game of next year is. I guess for me right now, it's Star Wars Outlaws. And, they've said 2024, but it could certainly get delayed. We also don't know when. My guess is that if it doesn't get delayed, it's going to be a holiday game next year. I don't think it's an early year game. I think we get another presentation next summer at like Summer Games Fest type thing. And then, it's like, oh, it's out in October or November or whatever. So I think we're a good ways off from that. So I'm kind of curious about next year. Maybe next year will be a little bit more of a down year. I truly do believe, I've said this ad nauseum on this channel, that I think 2023 is one of the greatest years ever for video games. So if next year is a down year, then that's fine. We'll just catch up on stuff from this year that we didn't get to. But yeah, so, keep an eye on the communities tab on the YouTube channel. I always post updates and schedule stuff on there. So, we'll figure out what's coming up this week as we go along the way. But other than that, that's going to do it for me. I got more spider webbing to do, some slingshotting around the city. Yeah, get on that as top priority a numero uno right now. Before we go, Christian, you got anything you want to get off your chest?
I need a break, man. I've been running hard this past week. I've got a Facebook Marketplace nurse coming over to give me a Gatorade Zero enema and Pedialyte IV.
They will not be coming into the house. Absolutely not. Gatorade enema. All right, then to each his own. Not for me, but you never know. All right, everybody, take it easy. We'll see you again real soon.